Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode 41 in the Craft Fair booth review series, where I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by one of my channel subscribers, and I'll point out things that the vendor is doing well and should continue to do, and then also identify some areas where there's room for improvement. During the review, keep your craft fair booth in mind so that you can apply these tips in order to take your booth to the next level. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, all right, and so for today's booth review, we're going to be taking a look at Courtney's booth, and her business name is Skindulgent Naturals. You can also actually find her on YouTube at Mommin in Millstown. All right, so I got that link posted in the description below. She's based out of Houston, Texas, and the booth is going to consist of natural and plant-based skin and body care products. All right, so we're going to be taking a look at a 10x10 outdoor booth for this review. The goal for the review is to make the booth look like a little boutique. So that's kind of been Courtney's goal for a while now. She's been doing craft fairs for about 1 year from the time this video is being recorded. So a very new business, and not even doing markets for a full year at this point. But I honestly think that she's off to a strong start at this stage in her craft fair journey. So let's dive in and find some opportunities to level up even further. All right, here we go. So here's the first look at the booth, and the first thing that we're going to talk about is displays. So there are two main tables. There is one set up in the back here, but we kind of have like a sort of a U pattern, a walk-in U layout, which is pretty common for especially 10x10 booths. The tables look to be 6-foot tables, and each of them is holding a considerable amount of displays and product on them. I like that you use the whole table, so from side to side and front to back. Throughout the booth, there are wooden crates, risers, trays, and two very large shelves that all do a nice job of showcasing a healthy variety of products. You make good use of your displays to divide different types of products, and each display chosen to feature the products that they have on or in them, it makes sense. For example, the soaps look very nice against the wood grain of the crates, and the products in jars or bottles look terrific with the black shelves. So even though we're mixing textures in the displays, what they're made out of, natural wood with black metal shelving, it makes sense when you factor in the products and how their appearances mesh with each display. On the right side of the booth, the lip balms are inside the glass containers, and this also looks really nice. This is the third texture of display at the booth, in addition to the wood and in addition to the metal frames. But again, it showcases the product really well. So overall, the displays function at a really high level. It's important to factor in not just about how things look as far as the displays go, we always have to factor in the ease of access for the shopper. Now, since we're looking at this view right here, I'm going to touch on canopy sidewalls later on in this video, but for now, let's just touch on the black backdrop that you have set up on the right side table at the booth. If you chose to not have sidewalls, this black backdrop is a fantastic addition to the table in order to remove some of that background distraction to help keep visitors' focus on your products. I don't really remember seeing one of these in booth review series before, and I wanted to highlight it during this review as a great addition to your booth. Something that isn't a display on its own, but a prop that greatly enhances your displaying ability. And now on this same table over here, we have the wood slices, and I can't begin to tell you how much I love these at booths and businesses that push a natural brand of products, especially when they're set down against black fabric. I'm going to go out on a record here and say that anyone who claims the wood slice against black fabric doesn't look good is just plain wrong. They have a right to their opinion, and they have a right to be wrong. So, but I mean, it would be easy enough for you to just set these down on the table by themselves, these products, and just let it be that. But the addition of the wood slices, it really just pushes that natural vibe of the booth, and it gives it something extra, you know? So again, I like that you're making use of the entire table, not just kind of like the back of it and creating some verticality, which is always good, but the fact that you have these smaller short items on the front here and you're using the entire width of the table as well. But yeah, like I said, these wood slices, it really contributes to the cozy factor at the booth. So yeah, all in all, when we take a look at your displays throughout the entire booth, it's a nice mix. And I think that they work with the products that are being displayed on them. So honestly, as far as your displays go, I really don't have a whole lot to critique on. I really like what you're doing, and I think this is one of the stronger elements of your booth. So now we're going to talk a little bit about pricing, and pricing is abundant at the booth, and there's kind of a combination of individual pricing with zoned pricing. So sometimes things are tagged in particular, but then other items, there's kind of like a zone marker for them. So for example, on the bottom left here, we see the $2 and the $3 signs for the soap bags and the soap trays. So that's a zone pricing. Then we have a little bit of individual treatment happening over here with these 3 soaps that are on sale. Okay, so that's kind of being covered in a more specific manner. So I like the fact that your sign is different for the sale and that it doesn't look like the other signs. It makes it stand out a little bit further and draw some attention to that sale happening at this particular event. Occasionally, we do see some bundle pricing, like for example, these soaps right here, $8 each or 3 for $21. Okay, so we kind of have a little bit of a combination there with the sign, and that's always good to see. Just laying it out and encouraging those multi-item transactions. We see some more bundling options on the other side of the booth. For example, the lip balms, $3 each or 4 for $10. We see the same thing over here with the day and night serums, $16 each or $28 for the set. And then over here on the right-hand side is another nice sign for pricing. And this is for the body creams. And it lets you know that the 5-ounce container is $12 or the 9-ounce is $20. Okay, so it's giving you that specification that you need for the different size items as well. So yeah, to me, the pricing is very obvious at the booth. Again, this is another strong element that, early on in your craft fair journey, you have down pretty well. I do like the consistency throughout the signing as well. So that's one of the things that I definitely look for in the booth reviews is to see and make sure that the signage is pretty consistent from the, one end of the booth to the other. And we see the same fonts, we see the same size of sign. So a lot of that just is being carried over from sign to sign. That's one of the things that I look for kind of like in an established vendor to see and make sure that they're doing throughout the entire booth. But again, pricing, this is one of these elements of the booth review that's going to go by pretty quickly because there's really not a whole lot that I can comment on as far as tips. I think you're doing a really nice job of making it very obvious. You're injecting your branding in. The font on the signage seems to match the font on your banner. It's just, I would say, bolder here, but it looks like the same font, so that looks great. And yeah, there's not a whole lot that I would like to comment on for this particular segment. Just kind of keep doing what you're doing, and it looks good. Okay, so now we're going to dive into signage in general, and this is one of the elements that we're going to talk a little bit more about than others in this review. So there's a tremendous amount of signage at the booth, and I think that you would benefit greatly from eliminating some of it from your setup. So we're going to take a look at this view of the soap area as an example. Now, this particular area of the booth is perhaps 2 to 3 feet wide, or a bit less than 1 meter if you metric system folk are watching. But in this relatively small area, there's a staggering amount of signage. And if we start at the top, you've got a sign that covers the whole zone that appears to be the size of a standard sheet of paper. This is a product description sign. And below that, we've got 2 smaller signs besides the highest level of products on display. So that's this one here, and then this one over here. Now, the sign on the left offers bundle pricing, but then it also includes a product photo as well as another product description that mostly matches what's up top on this sign up here. Now, the sign on the right goes into further product detail. So on these 3 signs, we're already seeing some redundancy. Now, when we take a look at the soap itself, each one has a nice label or a sleeve on them to describe the scent and some other details. However, in front of each soap, each bar of soap, is a sign that also describes the scent. So I think I'd like to challenge you to shed about 50% of the fluff in this zone in particular, and then analyze your booth zone by zone and do the same. Not necessarily 50% all the way around, but take a look at each zone. Try not to look at the entire booth as a whole all at once because it's easy to get overwhelmed that way. Just keep in mind, the goal here is to always ensure that the focus at the booth is always primarily on your items. You never want to let your supporting elements, such as displays, booth decor, or signage, to overshadow the products themselves. And while your signage looks attractive and it's executed nicely, I'd say there's simply too much of it at the booth currently. So this will help to make things a bit more breathable and welcoming at your marketing setup. And this is one of the questions that Courtney had for me in her email to me to kind of focus on during the review was, is there a little bit too much signage? Is there a little bit too much focus on the supporting elements rather than the products? And I would say, yes, a little bit. Nothing like super crazy, but scaling back I think is going to be beneficial in your situation. Now I do want to give this top sign a little bit of a shout out though because of its border. The border matches kind of like the greenery that you have throughout the booth as decor. We can see it up here at the top of the canopy. And so I like that you've carried it down into this sign. I would not mind seeing that carried through all of the signage. And when it comes to your product pricing signs, I don't really know that we need to have like the photo on there. Maybe the signage could be a little bit smaller then if it doesn't have the photo because it's placed right next to the items. Now, this is one of the elements of the booth review that I want to get some feedback on from everybody watching. I know that we kind of chime in during the live premieres, but if you could actually drop a comment on the video, because then the vendor will be able to see and get some feedback on. So how do you guys feel about the product photography on the signage? Let me know. Let me know if it feels redundant or if you like kind of just having that matched up, just to make sure that you're looking at the right sign for the right product. Now, when we're looking at the booth head on from this front angle, there's quite a bit of signage to absorb here as well. So we can kind of start at the back and we see the checkout stand, which is a really nice checkout stand, by the way. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But there's a couple of signs on there that show accepted payment methods. And then they also have the sign for following on social media. So that's great. And I think that makes sense to have these signs here. So that's a logical decision. They look good. They're big. Just really nicely done here. Again, might be kind of cool to have that border with the ivy or the greenery, whatever you want to call it, on this sign, but that's kind of just being nitpicky, to be honest. We're really getting specific here with that suggestion. Then over here on the top right, starting at the canopy top and working its way down, we have 3 signs. So the top one says handmade locally in small batches. Then we have luxurious moisturizers, creams, and lotions made with naturally derived skin-loving ingredients. And then we have gentle cleansing body washes and foaming sugar scrubs made with natural derived skin-loving ingredients. So I don't know that we need 3 big signs for this. You know what I mean? This is one of those situations where you might, kind of cut out a little bit of the fluff and kind of get this into one sign. One of the reasonings is that I don't know that I like the placement of this too much because when you're looking at a booth, again, the focus should kind of be on the products, you know what I mean? And basically these 3 signs are blocking almost this entire shelf, which feature quite a bit of products. So I don't know that I like the quantity of these signs, and I don't know if I like the placement of them either, you know what I mean? So it's just something to think about as you work towards finalizing the layout of the booth. Again, this is a very, very young, frankly, business, especially when it comes to participating at in-person markets. So the booth, I'm sure, is fluid at this point and things are still in motion. So this is one of the things to work on, so kind of keep this set in your mind as a goal to work on and get your signage limited down to what you really need and then have it in the most beneficial spots as possible. But finally, let's go ahead and talk about this A-frame sign. It's one of those things where I could probably talk about it in the marketing segment, but we'll touch on it here in Signage. And it says natural and plant-based skin and body care. Then it has all the products on it. And then it starts to go into a little bit more detail near the bottom. No GMOs, parabens, sulfates, toxic ingredients, sensitive skin friendly. It gets a little bit small near the bottom. And again, one of the things that we're talking about in this review and a point of focus is redundancy. And I think with the header at the top, natural and plant-based skin and body care, I think people are already kind of understanding that there isn't any of the bad stuff in it. You know what I mean? So that's one of those things where, the part at the bottom, especially once it starts to get into kind of small text where you have to be really close to it in order to read it anyhow, I don't know how valuable that is on the A-frame sign. You know what I mean? So just something to think about with that sign in particular. But I do like the fact that you have the A-frame sign out there, because it's definitely a call to attention to your booth. And the top part of it is nicely done. It's going to drive that idea home of what your booth is going to be offering. And the fact that you have natural and plant-based at the top, boom, that's already showing people that it's going to be quality products at the booth. All right, so let's just go ahead now and roll into marketing. And the first thing that we see is the big banner at the back. You've got the logo, which has a touch of green in it, then your business name, Skindulgent Naturals, and then underneath, no nonsense, luxurious skincare. All right, so keeping it simple on the banner, no problem with that whatsoever. The colors matches the colors that you have throughout the booth. Primarily, we're going to be focusing on black, white, and green throughout the booth. So that matches up with that as well. So as far as your banner goes, no issues with that at all. Throughout the booth, you've got your business cards laid out. So here's one example of that over here. You've got the simple acrylic tray so that you can see the entire design of the business card. Personally, that's my favorite business card holder, is just the simple acrylic tray, because I like to see the entire business card design. And I don't know, to me, it just looks the nicest. Over on this side of the booth, we've got the business cards again, so that's great to see them in multiple locations. We did talk about this sign earlier, but of course we can touch on this during the marketing segment. Great idea to always have this somewhere at a craft fair booth. Those in-person events are a great way to drive up your social media following numbers, and it does work. Vendors, you always got to remember to use those in-person events in order to drive your social media following, and that's just going to help you throughout the year and in between shows. So always make sure that you're, having some kind of QR codes out, business cards, doing that, whatever you can to get people to follow you, and that's going to help you throughout the year. And touching on that, on top of the checkout stand over here, it looks to be an email sign-up list. That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. Just I can kind of see like a divide in the middle of the sheet, and it's usually like name and then email address. But there's some sort of clipboard up here, and regardless of what it is, it's always a good idea to have that old school approach in addition to the QR codes. Not everybody is going to know what a QR code is, or what they do, or even just how it functions. So you don't want to forget about the people who have that old school approach in order to get them to follow you throughout the year as well. So just want to have all your bases covered, and it's good to see that happening at the booth. We'll move down a little bit over here and talk about the table runner. You have two table runners present at the booth, one on this table and then one over here. You can kind of see it, but I'll flip over to the other one because you can see more of it. Again, nicely done. Kept it really simple. The table runners are in good shape, good condition, so everything looks good here. Yeah, marketing at the booth, I don't really see a whole lot that you're struggling with. I think that you have a solid approach with covering both kind of the new school and the old school methods. And as long as you're doing that, that's going to just drive that push as much as possible with those in-person events. One thing to touch on, though, before we wrap up the marketing segment, is when we look over here to this side of the booth, this is a really neat feature that we haven't seen before in the booth review series, and that is a portable sink, okay? Because she has foaming sugar scrub testers available to sample for people. And it's nice to have that consideration in mind where people can just, rinse off their hands really quick and not have any kind of sticky residue or anything like that on their hands throughout the day. So this is definitely a very, very strong marketing element happening at the booth in real time. Okay. So a lot of times when we talk about marketing a booth during the booth review series, We're talking about things like custom orders or things that can kind of benefit you later on, pushing those social media following and all that stuff and email contact lists. That's all kind of like marketing with the future in mind. But this is marketing in real time, okay? This is basically giving people that chance like right away to put their hands on your product and to show them that, hey, this really is quality work. And, I'm putting my faith behind my products enough to let you test it right here before you buy it. So this is sort of like a leap of faith from vendors that we see. And it really is nice to see this. I mean, I'm kind of thinking about this from an organizer's perspective right now. I really like when vendors do this because it shows that the vendor stands behind their product enough to basically put it to the test right here and right now. So honestly, for all you vendors out there that do some sort of testing or free sampling, this is really cool to see. I'm going to let you know that a lot of organizers appreciate this. It makes the craft fair a more lively, a more interactive experience too. So it's a little bit more memorable for the guests. So organizers definitely appreciate when vendors do this. Just a little bit of a sidebar, a little bit of a side note. You got to be careful with testing and free sampling at booths, not necessarily in this particular situation. With a skincare booth, you probably don't have like a whole lot of like permitting or licensing that you have to do in order to do this in person. I don't know. There could be, but I'm just guessing. As opposed to a food vendor, which I know for a fact, they have a lot of kind of precautions that you have to take, a lot of hoops that you got to jump through ahead of time to make sure that you're doing sampling and testing the right way. Okay, so whenever there's food or something that can be consumed on site, there's a lot of permitting and licensing that you have to be aware of. Okay, so I just wanted to make that side note during the booth review that if you're going to do that, just be aware of whatever paperwork you have to have completed in order to do that legally in your area. Okay. So yeah, that's about it for marketing. Doing a really good job. I like the marketing that you have in place, and I like that you've kind of stuck with your branding all throughout. There's a couple of spots where you stray away from it, like these black signs, for example. They sort of stray away from your branding a little bit. I probably would just prefer all of the signage to have like that green ivy around it, that green border. I think that's really nice. And there's like little tweaks that you can do in your signage to make it stand out and make it different. Like, for example, your sale signage is red here just to have that stand out and set it apart from all your other signage. But I think just carrying your branding through all of your signage, that's like another goal that you can kind of work on throughout this next year. All right, so now let's talk about vertical space. So the displays throughout the booth offer a wide variety of vertical usage. This is definitely one of your stronger elements at the booth, and it's clear to me that you're keeping vertical space in mind when setting up your layout because there's several spots where the visitor is getting a floor to ceiling experience. So on both the left and the right side of the booth, we see good utilization from basically the ankle level all the way up to eye level and beyond. Now, vendors, keep in mind, verticality can come in many forms. It doesn't just have to be one big display. The A-frame sign is a good example of using vertical space. It's not just about building upwards, but you also have opportunities down low to make a positive impact at your booth. Then, when we take a look at the decor high up inside the booth, this is another example of using all space to your advantage in order to create a great shopping experience for your guests. Now, I like that Courtney has left herself with plenty of room to be seen from the shopper's perspective. There's a nice area in the back of the booth that opens up a bit, and whether she stands in the wide open part in the middle or she stands behind the checkout stand, both of these provide plenty of visibility to be seen and approached by shoppers. It is important to have some kind of open space set aside at the booth so that shoppers can easily find the vendor. You never want to be sitting down behind a huge wall of items. So when it comes to vertical space at the booth, having those openings available is just as important as the space you fill up with products and displays. So yeah, all things considered, really good job here. I mean, it's a nice flowing level of different heights throughout the entire booth. And we talked about this a little bit in the past in different episodes, but I like the fact that the height variations are something different. And it's not just the same thing at the top every time. So over here, we see a little bit of peak of signage. Over here, we kind of get that green ivy look. Then you have the bath sign. We come down to another sign. Then you have your marketing billboard. You're probably going to be here, so that'll be you. And then we go down to this level where it's a little bit lower, and then we come up where the highest point on this side is products. All right, so it's like something different at every level, and that part of the booth definitely is not a repeating, redundant kind of issue. And then again, just to circle back on some of the lower things that we see below hip level, like below that table level, you have 2 table runners. All right, so that's something to check out. You have a sign over here, the social media sign that kind of comes a little bit lower. You've got gift sets down here that we'll talk a little bit about later. And then you have your A-frame sign. Okay, so really, like I said, we're going floor to ceiling, and there's a really wide variety of verticality for what's being showcased at all levels. So yeah, great job here. So now let's talk about colors, contrast, and texture. The first thing I'm going to say is that the use of greenery as decor throughout the booth is really pleasant and adds a sense of coziness to the booth that makes it a welcoming environment for guests. I honestly wouldn't change anything with the greenery decor that you have throughout the booth, particularly what is placed high up on the underside of the canopy. It really looks terrific against the white backdrop of the canopy, and the placement of it makes sense in that it mimics what we would see in nature, vines climbing their way up a canopy, a tree canopy. So this is really a spectacular addition of both color and texture at the booth. But now circling back to colors specifically though, most of what we see at the booth is 3 colors, black, white, and wood. There are some occasional flashes of green, and it's good to introduce that here and there throughout the booth. Now, these are all colors that correlate well with the vibe of your booth. You're all about natural and fresh, and having a clean, simple visual aesthetic is a great choice when offering these kinds of items. And I know that I mentioned this a lot in the booth review series, but it is worth mentioning that sometimes the items themselves can help drive the vision for what a booth should look like, or more specifically, what the supporting elements at a booth should look like. So let's take a look at the soaps here as an example. Absolutely beautiful colors in the products themselves, right? So in this case, the items themselves are vibrant and exciting. You wouldn't want to display them on something that is also visually loud. There always has to be some kind of balance. If the products are wild in color, then the display should be toned down. However, if the items are very tame in appearance, this is when you have some room for expression. If we look at the top right of this photo here, notice on the tall shelf next to the soaps, how the green decor starts to make its way down the sides of the display. This is very tasteful, and it in no way distracts someone from seeing the bottles on the top shelf. All right, basically, if I boil it down in a very general sense, always remember this. Wild products go with tame displays, and tame products go with interesting displays. And before moving on, another great example of this in action at the booth is the bath and shower gift sets on the bottom right-hand side of your booth setup. Wonderful colors in the gift sets, and nice job making sure that they're surrounded with calm colors. There's basically just black all around it. Now, these particular gift sets, she decorates them differently throughout the year. All right, so this was sort of like in the Christmas season, even though it looks absolutely gorgeous out. Texas, I'm from Wisconsin. I wouldn't know what it looks like this time of year. It's like, oh, you guys have green grass and you still have leaves on your trees. That must be nice. Okay, but anyways, she'll take these gift sets, and depending on what time of year it is, if it's close to like a certain holiday, she'll decorate the gift sets in different ways. So that's a really, really cool element of the booth that I wanted to highlight during this segment. I guess I could have done it during marketing or really just a few different segments, but this is something I wanted to talk about at some point during the review because this can kind of morph and change throughout different times of year. And that is something that is always going to keep your booth relevant. And that's something that a lot of vendors, even veteran vendors, will struggle with sometimes, is they get sort of locked in to having their booth look a certain way, and maybe it works really well during a certain time of year, but then other times of year it might look sort of out of place. So being able to take your products and sort of mold and shape them and tweak them into whatever is happening during a specific time of year, that is always a really strong trait to develop as a vendor. So I wanted to give you kudos there, Courtney, because this is something that you should definitely keep on doing as the years go on. All right, so now let's just talk about strength of theme. One of the highlights of the booth for sure. I like that this element of the booth is reinforced with the A-frame sign out front. Right off the bat, we know that the booth will feature soaps, lotions, body creams, scrubs, lip balms, body wash, and facial creams and serums. That's a wonderful variety of skin and body care products to choose from, and by having a lot of variety, you aren't squeezing your demographic potential reach. There's something at this booth for everyone, female, male, young, old, whatever, everybody. So again, that A-frame sign out front, it is doing you a lot of favors, so nicely done there. Now, the more booths I analyze in great detail, the more I feel like vendors should go one of two routes when they think about strength of theme within their market setups. The first choice is something like this, where you have a theme established and you're staying within it, but you're not straying away by having other products that make no sense at a skincare booth, while casting a wide net to increase the potential shopper demographics. So like I mentioned before, appealing to a wide audience, but staying within that skincare theme at the booth. The second choice for strength of theme is to be very niche. Maybe you don't cast a wide net, but you become the go-to person for that type of product. If you're a vendor who goes that route and creates something specific for a narrow target audience, you have to be absolutely strict and rigid with your own standards, both in the quality of your products and the appearance of your booth. Basically, what I'm saying is, vendors, think of it like this. The wider the net you cast, the more forgiveness that you have in your booth to attract shoppers. Because again, you're trying to appeal to many demographics. But the more specific your genre or niche of crafts you feature at your booth, the more you need to raise the bar in all aspects of your booth in order to keep your conversion rates high. I just wanted to throw this tip in there for all vendors to keep in mind, but as far as this booth in particular, I think this category of the booth review is one of your strongest suits. If someone has some kind of interest in skin or body care products, odds are you've got the right item they're looking for. And honestly, one of the things that we can just even identify what you're going to present at your booth is built right into your business name itself, Skindulgent Naturals. That phrase alone is dropping a massive hint of what is going to be offered at the booth. So this is one of the things that any vendor can do when they're basically planning out their business or they're forming their business. You know, what should I be called? What should my identity be? What should my theme be? Sometimes you can build your branding right into your name itself, and that's going to go a long way in marketing down the road. It's only going to help you when you've got that reinforcement built right into your business brand's name. So yeah, Courtney, strength of theme, you're knocking it out of the park. Great job here. So let's roll into accessibility. This is probably the best time to talk about the tarp that is laid down on the ground under the booth. This is one of the things that Courtney mentioned to me in the email that we discussed a little bit. There's a reason why this is there, and it is a permanent weekly booth assignment for Courtney in this exact spot of this area, and the grass tends to get muddy where she is, which is not only unsightly, but it's honestly a potential slipping hazard for guests or for Courtney herself. So she's staked down the front of the tarp so that it's flush with the sidewalk, and then she pulled the tarp really tight and staked it down in the back. So you can see that it's not bundling up or rolling up anywhere. It's pretty tight, you know what I mean? So the tarp itself is not its own tripping hazard. Now, she said that she's received positive feedback from visitors on the tarp and that she's made sure that it isn't creating an issue at the booth by introducing new hazards, like I mentioned before. So for me, as long as the event organizer is cool with it, then keep doing your thing if the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Now, one potential consideration with it is that this event takes place in Houston, Texas. I've only been to Texas once, and the sun, it hits different down there. So I could see this potentially attracting a bit more heat than the grass alone. So my recommendation is to continuously monitor heat levels at the booth to ensure a comfortable shopping experience for your guests. But again, circling back to the whole point of the tarp itself, it is nice to not have to worry about mud and that whole situation with the grass being rough. You can actually see right here on this left side, the grass is entirely gone. So if it rains a little bit, yeah, I imagine this entire area gets pretty gross pretty quickly. But throughout the booth, tripping hazards are minimal. The only area of concern there is the hand washing station. Now that cloth in particular seems to be rolled up on the ground quite a bit. An easy fix here is just to squat down behind the sink, then pull back as much of the cloth as you can, and then just use like a binder clip or some sort of clasp to get that excess cloth behind the sink where it's out of view. This will not only enhance the look of the front side, but also eliminate a potential tripping hazard. Now, I do like that you're using proper tent weights at your booth. This is not only aesthetically pleasing, but it also is an effective approach to making sure the tent is stable. Now, if wind becomes severe, you can look into a stake and ratchet system to ensure your canopy does not move. If you need some kind of reference, I outline this technique in great detail in my video called Preventing Craft Fair Disasters. So just keep that in mind if you've ever been worried about the stability of your canopy in high winds. So, when we consider accessibility from the standpoint of how close do visitors have to be to the booth to understand what's being offered, I would give the booth an average rating here. The positives are the big lettering at the top of the banner, in the back, and the top half of that A-frame sign out front. Like I said, the signage is doing a good job of pulling the people in. But I say the top half of the A-frame because the text at the bottom is a little bit small and will only be beneficial to people who are standing close by. Now, the negatives are the fact that if you look at the booth head on, like this view we see right here, the first thing that you see on the left side is a sink, and the first thing that you see on the right side is a lot of signage. So I think a potential drawback here is that the products themselves are sort of taking a back seat at the booth. All right, if we address the hand washing sink, again, it's really nice to have this, and it's very considerate for your guests. I would have this located deeper into the booth though, and create a layout that ensures your products are the first thing that someone sees at your booth. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that might help you out is to invest in a banner for the front of your canopy, meaning this portion at the top up here. Now this is going to give you the opportunity to project the vibe of your booth outwards and make it seen from a great distance. You can have your business name or even just a phrase kind of like what you have at the top of your A-frame sign that says natural and plant-based skin and body care. Just be sure not to overcrowd this particular banner if you choose to design one. Keep it short and keep it simple so that the lettering is large and it can be seen from a nice distance to pull people your way. Now, another aspect of accessibility that we can analyze is, will visitors want to come into the booth? Meaning, is it too crowded? Does the layout accommodate guests? Is the booth tidy and appealing in a general sense? For all of those questions, I think you're doing a good job. You can get a solid number of guests into the booth and your tidiness is definitely above average. So yeah, I know that was kind of a longer segment of this booth review, but just some tips in there to kind of keep in mind to, again, bring the booth up to the next level. Let's go ahead and roll into general use of space. I like the fact that you've invested some space at your booth to have a checkout stand. I also really like the size of it and feel like it's perfect for your space you have to work with in this particular layout. The placement of it also is nice as it positions you, the vendor, to stand looking outwards so that you can simultaneously greet your guests while being ready to handle a transaction at any time. And so since we're talking about general use of space, I do want to mention one more time that you're probably a bit heavy-handed with signage at the moment. There's probably just about as much signage at the booth as there are products for sale. So I'd consider getting that to maybe 2/3 to 1/3 ratio, or even honestly 3/4 to 1/4. You want to keep the focus mainly on your products. And I currently think that there's maybe a bit too much focus and usage of the square footage dedicated towards signage. So now this is something that I promised we'd talk about later on in the video, and that is the decision to not have a back wall or side walls on your canopy. There's honestly some pros and cons with having sidewalls. You may have to continue to monitor the heat levels inside the canopy if you do hang sidewalls. However, I think they would greatly enhance the environment within your booth. As it stands right now, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit tough at times to focus on the foreground of these photos when the background is so incredibly busy. If you decide to explore sidewalls, obviously I'd recommend white as your color. This will keep temperatures down as much as possible while also giving you the best light inside your tent. I think white would look really nice as a backdrop for your products since many of them are dark colored containers. And then just to touch on one of the other questions that she had for me was an issue of, is there potential overcrowding at the booth? And I think, again, it just really boils down to that signage. I think there's just a little bit too much there. But as far as your products, as far as your decor, your layout in general, I really like all of those other elements. You know what I mean? So I don't think this is like a really difficult fix here. And it's something that's not going to be overwhelming for you to kind of course correct on. So just take it a little bit at a time. Like I said, focus on the zones. It's easier to do that little by little and make those improvements as opposed to being like, okay, I have to basically overhaul the signage at the entire booth. That's going to be really difficult, especially if you have shows already lined up for this year. Just take it little by little. But again, Courtney, don't get discouraged because, like I said, all those other elements of the booth that I've discussed, your displays, your layout, your textures, your color, all those other parts, I'm really a big fan of, so nothing major here to worry about. Finally, let's go ahead and roll into the eye test. And the eye test is the 1 or 2 seconds that a visitor is walking by. And what are you doing as a vendor to get them to stop and check out your booth? I would say above average. Again, we have the issue right now with this layout of a lot of the products being blocked and obstructed at first glance. But you do also have the benefit of that A-frame sign kind of giving people the heads up of what to expect inside the booth. So it's kind of 50-50 right now. I think this is going to just drastically increase if you can get some products pushed out front, having that as the first thing that people see, and then reducing that signage. Really, just if you knock out those 2 things, that's going to really take the booth to the next level with, just 2 things. So this was a really fun booth review to do. There was some aspects of this booth that we haven't seen before. I mean, just for example, the hand washing station, just some different elements that are new to the booth review series and created some unique challenges and opportunities to talk about. So really appreciate the opportunity here, Courtney, and appreciate your detail and all the emails and all the questions that you had, and hope that we were able to get those answered for you. And everyone, be sure to give Courtney a follow on social media. That would be fantastic. Check out her products, her website, all that good stuff. And if you're interested in having your booth reviewed, check out my website, howtocraftfair.com, and I have a page specifically on there for booth reviews that you can check out. Would love to review your booth and would like to do many of them this year. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe and share and comment and all that good stuff. And I hope you have yourself a fantastic day.